Hello everybody, Ollie here. Time for some more reading recommendations from my bookshelf, and I'll also be telling you about how you can get even more free education from today's sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. More on that in a bit. The first book I have to recommend to you is Graham Greene's The Quiet American. And I don't read a lot of fiction, so it was actually really nice to be able to pick this up. The reason I put it on my list is because it's kind of about how invisible ideological assumptions are made visible. The story is about a young, naive American spy who goes into Vietnam in 1952, so before the American invasion, and he's there to do a kind of Captain America style, spreading democracy, safeguarding freedom type of a mission. But the idea is that he's too young and naive to realize that what he's really there doing is killing people in the name of American corporate expansionism. A few days ago I went to an exhibition at the Tate Britain on the artist David Hockney, and I was actually quite reminded of Greene's prose, because like Greene, Hockney in some of his paintings and drawings gives the viewer only a few details, but they're so well chosen details that they certainly allowed me anyway to really imaginatively fill in the gaps. And that just really brought me in closer to his work. And Greene did the same thing. He only gives a couple of little images when he's describing a scene, but they're so well chosen and well selected that they allowed me to really imagine something vivid. When midnight struck, I couldn't stay quiet any longer and went down into the street. A lot of old women in black trousers squatted on the landing. It was February, and I suppose too hot for them in bed. One trishaw driver pedalled slowly by towards the riverfront, and I could see lamps burning where they had disembarked the new American planes. That's all the detail he gives to set the opening scene, and that, for me, isn't a lot, but allowed me to imagine this whole thing. So he's very clever in the way that he uses imagery. The second book I have to recommend I can't show you because I lent it to a friend, but it's called Social Death by Lisa Marie Cacho. Sticking with the theme of making invisible assumptions visible again, I'd say the central distinction that Cacho makes is between behavior that is illegal against the law and behavior that is criminal, deserving of punishment. And we make this distinction all the time. There are plenty of things that we would say are like technically illegal, but not really deserving of punishment. And there are probably some things you can think of that we think, no, that deserves punishment, but it's actually technically not illegal. What Cacho is interested in is the fact that sometimes the same action can be criminal, deserving of punishment, only when certain people do it. So for instance, the first example she uses is when survivors of Hurricane Katrina were scavenging in a city for supplies, and she notes and backs up with evidence from newspapers and so on that when white people were scavenging, it was called scavenging survival, it was kind of a survival narrative, but when black people were scavenging, it was called looting, and it was a criminal narrative. And she's very interested in how distinctions like that get made and how certain populations of people end up being criminalized, which is to say, deserving of punishment. And her central thesis is that whenever we talk about law-abiding citizens or good citizens or so on, somewhere, sometime, there is always some group of people being criminalized as the kind of necessary other to that, as a way of saying law-abiding citizen means you are not like these people. And those people might not necessarily have done anything wrong, but they are kind of the necessary sacrificial lamb for the legal societal order that emerges. And she has some really fascinating discussions of the way that the philosophy of human rights really sanctions and legitimizes state-based violence. So that's really cool. And all of these ideas are going to be informing an upcoming maybe 1 or 2 part video that I'm making on refugees and human rights and philosophy of human rights and how that works. So it is quite a tricky book, it is quite nuanced and complicated, but if you are interested in, again, this kind of making visible of invisible assumptions, then this would really be a great one to pick up. Before I tell you about my final book of the month, I owe a big thank you to this week's sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. If you've never heard of them, they are a website where you can subscribe and you can watch educational videos by top lecturers from top universities all around the world. They've got over 7,000 videos in their library. You can learn about biology, maths, chemistry, how to take a photograph, how to cook. They've got people on there who aren't just lecturers from universities, but people from National Geographic and the Culinary Institute of America. They've got a really good series on formal logic, which I know is something that a lot of my fans have been asking me to make a video on, and I've been using that series to brush up on my first order predicate logic. Normally subscriptions start at around $14.99 a month, but for my viewers, if you use the special link thegreatcoursesplus.com/philosophytube, your first month of learning is completely free. You could learn so much in that time. So please visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/philosophytube, link in the description, to start your free trial today. And the last book I'm going to talk about is Slavoj Žižek's Violence. There's a type of pufferfish called fugu fish, which is apparently very delicious, but most of it is incredibly poisonous. And in order to prepare and eat fugu fish, you have to undergo extensive training so that you know how to properly dissect and cook it. And that, I think, is a little bit what this book is like. There are tiny little bits of it where I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, that's a good thought, particularly the stuff about making invisible ideological assumptions visible again. But it's surrounded by a lot of stuff that, if you don't know how to dissect and prepare and interpret and in some cases actively dismiss it, it might mess you up a little bit. So there's more than a few instances in here of casual racism. There's more than a few instances, I think, of Zizek contradicting himself from chapter to chapter. There's a few instances where he's talking about a real-world event but doesn't seem to me to have spoken to any of the people who are really involved with it. And the other thing is that a lot of the bits that are good, not all of them, but a lot of them have been said before and have been said better. So rather than recommend this book, here is a list of things that you could and probably should read either first or instead. I'll put the full list in the description, so don't worry. I recognise there's a lot of stuff there, and I definitely don't want to come across as kind of, oh, nobody could understand this until they've read these 9 million really difficult to find texts. The point I'm trying to get across is that I don't really recommend this book, is basically what I'm saying, and that you could do better by reading any or all of those other things instead. Those are all the books I have to talk about this month. Thank you so much to the fans who sent them to me. I have an Amazon wishlist of books, and it's always so amazing when people send me stuff off that. It's like a little birthday present, but when it's not even my birthday, so thank you so much. If you ever want to send me stuff to help me research the show, then I'll put a link to that wishlist below as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week for something. I haven't planned out what yet. It might be a video on white supremacist propaganda, which is gonna make my comments section a bit of a nightmare for a while, but that's an important video and it needs to be made. So I will see you for that. Bye!